Okay, friends. So today I want to kind of finish up the talk on the five aggregates and the mind that we've been exploring in the last couple of days. And so yesterday I was talking about these five aggregates that really are the core of the Buddhist teaching. Because in the definition of in the Four Noble Truths, in the definition of suffering, as I've already mentioned, the Buddha said that birth, old age, disease, death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. And getting what you don't want and getting what you don't, not getting what you want and getting what you don't want is suffering. And so if that was too much to handle, he said, in short, the five aggregates of clinging are suffering. And that's one of the more difficult aspects of the Buddhist teaching, to understand. Because people hear, the five aggregates, I think it's some pie in the sky kind of theory or something. But it's everything that makes up our life and existence, essentially. So the material aggregate, as we talked about, is anything that's made up of atoms, molecules, and cells. Basically, matter, physical matter. There's this body, everything on Earth pretty much, and it comprises the material elements as well as water, and fire, and the air element are all part of the aggregate of matter or form. Sometimes it's called form, sometimes it's called matter or materiality. But to keep it simple, basically it means anything in the world that we experience through our senses. So anything you can see, hear, smell, taste, feel in the body belong to the materiality. And the five aggregates are called name and form. And so out of the five aggregates, one is materiality, four belong to the mind. So the second, in Buddhism, the mind isn't kind of a thing like a little box inside of your brain, and that's the mind or something like that. The mind is a process. It's a mental process. And it's made up of feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Now, I went over these kind of a little bit yesterday. And basically, they occur in every sensory experience. So every moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, feeling something, it means touching, or even thinking a thought in your mind, or you're meditating, all of a sudden maybe a picture of your mother pops into your mind, or something else, or a thought about somebody who, cursed you, So that's a mental, a mental activity, a mental object, mental object. So the feeling, perception, the mental formations, which are these mental objects, and consciousness. Now, consciousness is probably what most people regard to as like being the mind. But consciousness essentially is just the knowing faculty or awareness. But sometimes it's called consciousness when it's part of the aggregates, and awareness is a more refined aspect, is the pure type of awareness. But anyway, consciousness. And it's subject-object consciousness, which we talked about when the baby was born. It didn't have subject-object consciousness in those first few days or months or even of the life. Only when it started, senses got developed a little bit, it started learning language, it started then reacting to things and starting to go after things, and that this sense of the ego consciousness developed. So these 5 aggregates arise in every sense experience. So you hear a sound, and usually that sound will produce either a painful, pleasant, or neutral sensation, depending on how loud it is. If it's a real faint one, it'll just produce a neutral sensation. You probably won't react to it. But usually it's the stronger ones that will produce either a painful feeling or a pleasant feeling. So a car crash, for example, usually in most people that will bring about a painful feeling, I mean, a kind of a shock, and then a fear about who got hurt. But others, nature sounds like, birds chirping in the morning, or the pitter-patter of rain, or whatever, nature sounds more. And also sounds that we, like, and produce a pleasant feeling. And then based on that, we remember it. Or at the same time, pleasant feeling and perception. We talked about perception already. How many people remember that from yesterday? So the sound is basically just a sound. But the mind will remember that sound because every single object in the universe has a separate vibration, its own little code, so to speak. Just like every object in Amazon is 2 billions of items, has its own little, what's that called? Scanning code or barcode. So every object in the world that we've ever contacted has its own vibration, and it's sort of remembered by the mind, just the way that you punch something in the computer, it remembers it. And every time you start to punch in something, it second guesses already. It's second guessing what you want, and it throws it out there, right? So actually, our mind works very similar to that. I've always thought that the mind was, like a computer. In fact, when I was first went to junior college, my first subject was computer programming. That was back in 1967, when it was just these large, huge IBM machines, and I took this computer programming course, and but then later when I got out of the Army and came back, I took another course in that. But then when I encountered the Dhamma, I lost all interest. I said, what is this computer? This mind is the greatest computer. And after taking a couple of meditation courses, what is these IBM computers? The mind is the greatest thing. So I gave up the interest in regular computers. I wanted to program this computer. I wanted to find out how to reprogram this computer. So anyway, so in the five aggregate experience, as I mentioned, all those come together in each moment of contact. Contact is the key. Contact is part of the 12 links of dependent origination that I might get to at some point during the retreat. But without contact, basically, we're dead to the world. So contact means sound punching the eardrum, color striking the eye, odor, striking the nose, flavor striking the tongue, something touching the skin either from outside or from inside, like your stomach gurgling or something making a noise, or a pain. That's contact. And that's contact is similar to how many heard that gong? Okay, so when I struck the gong, that initial strike is the contact. But that only lasted a second. The actual contact of the mallet to the thing, the bell, the gong. And then that vibration, the sound vibrations came. And you heard those sound vibrations? Just kind of, they kept on continuing for, several seconds. And, well, that's very similar to what contact does. So the object contacts is this, because this body has sensitive endings in it. There's sensitive nerve endings in the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the senses. And those are the sense bases. Anyway, they transmit that vibration, that contact, through the nervous system where it reaches the brain and then triggers off the feeling, perception, and reaction, and the consciousness. Well, the consciousness was kind of always already there, but anyway, so that vibration that's going, from the gong, going outward, is like the feeling. It's the I don't know exactly what they call it, but anyway, it's the neurons or the electromagnetic energy that's running through the nervous system, carrying those impulses to the brain. When it's traveling through the nervous system, it's picked up as being something pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And that's because of the memory and the way we've reacted in the past. Like when I heard the avocado, it's the word avocado, because whatever past experience that triggered off one of these, unpleasant vibrations, and then I perceived what it was, or at the same time, feeling and perception basically are intimately connected. You can't have one without the other. But anyway, so that it's a feeling tone. It senses something pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then you remember from the language, it's connected with language and past experience, you remember what it is. So even with your eyes closed in meditation, How many people noticed that in one of your meditations? With sound, you could hear different sounds. Did any pictures pop into your mind? If it wasn't a picture, at least it was an idea, right? Somebody's walking in the hallway. Somebody's closing that door. Air conditioner's on. Bhante just said something. So that's basically the perception. And it's connected with the feeling. Then you react to it. Then a thought may come up about it. Or like you might get angry at somebody making a sound, or get disturbed, or like it. So like, dislike, attraction, aversion, and the whole gamut of thoughts, maybe fear, worry, anxiety. You get a phone call in the middle of the day, from the police, all of a sudden there's a fear arises in your mind. What did my daughter or son do today? So it triggers off these things very quickly. And all these sort of habits are called sankhara. That means the conditioning. So that fourth aggregate is called the sankhara khanda, the collection of sankharas. And so it's the way we react. And it might cause you to, like, if you have an itch on your body, then this, we just go like, that's a sankhara. That means it's a bodily sankhara, a bodily habit that we do. Doing all any kind of movements, anything, basically is a sankhara. But it's a conditioned way of reacting. And all that happens automatically. You're not doing it. You don't do anything. It's all just like a computer program runs by itself. That is how most of our life runs, out of habits that we picked up since childhood, depending on where you were born and the things you were exposed to, your education or religion, or so many things, including environment, and all that is conditioning us to, as we grow up, to in education and so on. Anyway, so those that feeling, perception, and volition. Volition means kind of action. And basically that's where the karma is created, in that sankharas and reacting to the sankharas. And then there's the consciousness that is basically allows you to be aware of feeling, perception, and volition. But specifically, it's the ego consciousness. In everybody who's not an arahant basically has ego consciousness, or they're seeing it as a subject-object, me against that thing, the world that's coming at you. It's kind of what's called dualistic perception, or dualistic consciousness. So that process of those aggregates coming together kind of all at once in that moment of contact, they pretty much come together, but they do kind of come together in that order, like the material vibration, contact, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. But that is happening faster than a supercomputer is processing information. Nowadays, actually, the analogy between computers and the mind is even getting more, because now with AI, with AI, I mean, every single thing ever existed in the universe is in a computer somewhere. And those, you ask it anything, even a difficult question, and it runs through billions and trillions of different places in just a second or two. I mean, is that how it works? Anybody? Anybody familiar with AI? So our mind is working faster than that, or at least as fast. That process. So that's why we don't see it. And so we think that we are doing all these things and everything is just a smooth flowing kind of experience. But that is not actually how it's happening on the very, very deep mental level, that process of contact, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. And basically they arise and vanish like that quickly. So there's said to be, how many are good in mathematics? Any of you mathematicians? 10 to the 24 power. You can crunch some numbers. 10 to the 24 power. One time somebody, he computed it, and it came out to be something like septillion. Not a billion, septillion. Times a second. That's how fast those aggregates are arising and vanishing, in the brain. We all know even brain science is starting to understand that. Actually, it's very interesting. How many people have seen a graph of a EKG or EEG, the brain one? EEG, right? Electroencephalogram. How many have seen those graphs? That show or even the heart. Right? Each one of those would be like one contact. And you see how they've got amplitude, right? Some of those little things are just small, like in a sound, if you have done sound recording and sound editing, So it's very interesting, actually, because that is how the brain is processing information. And so we can see how many there are there. If you enlarge and drag out those, those sound bar graphics things. So anyway, that's what's happening within our brain. And so in meditation, actually, especially in the Vipassana system of meditation, it's actually geared and developed to try to gradually tune in to see how, to get a taste of that. In other words, to see how the mind is working, especially in terms of the mind moments. Now, how many of you so far in your meditation, or if you've gotten, enough, concentration, or that you're able to notice clearly, like many things coming and going in the space of just, a few seconds, especially body sensations. Body sensations are probably the most because there's billions of cells in this body and they're all vibrating and they're all producing these contacts. But only the strongest ones take our attention, of course. But in between that, how many of you, as you're feeling sensations, and breathing is one, of course, it's always going in and out, but there's others. And then in between, anybody hear a sound? Could hear some sound? How many heard 3 or 4 or 5 within the space of a couple of seconds? Sound in the room, sound from outside, maybe a car going down, an ambulance going down a road, birds chirping outside. sounds in the house, sounds in your stomach, or some other places in your body. And, they just, most of them just arose and vanished very quickly. Anybody could notice how quickly something happened? It was like almost, wow. So that is the kind of actually attention that we try to cultivate, especially in the vipassana, method of the meditation. So it's a little bit different than just getting concentrated on focusing on only one spot and trying to narrow it down and so on. It's kind of the opposite. You're opening the attention back up to notice more things. And so that's the beginning of this, what I call the perception of impermanence. And we'll get to that. We'll be talking more about that too. So it's a training. It's a specific training in doing that, because normally we're not trained to do that. Our whole life, we're just, we're looking and doing a lot of things, of course, but, we're doing it with attachment and with the past and the future coming into play with things that you are doing or hearing, and lingering on things. And so we only see a tiny fraction of all the things that are coming through our senses in our ordinary state. It's like we're probably only noticing 1/10 or 1% of the vibrations of the world that are coming through our senses at any one time. The mind kind of just picks and chooses the few that it's most attached to, especially with like or dislike, with the pleasure or the pain. Those are the ones we react to. Like, let's say you're meditating and you might have a good concentration and you're having some pleasant sensation, and then all of a sudden some sharp pain arises somewhere in the body. Then you can see how quickly the mind, goes there and starts worrying about that. What's going to happen if I sit longer? And so the mind creates a whole separate world around this particular pain. Or maybe it's a sound. Maybe you're in a good state of meditation, all of a sudden some people start talking over there and they're getting boisterous, and you can see this, and then the mind gets drawn to that, and then it creates this scenario, getting upset. So the mind is constantly creating its own little worlds around whatever predominant sensations, like even right now, okay, for all of you right now, your world is kind of right here in the room, right? Sitting there listening, or what? So, but then when we finish and you go back to meditating, then the mind is creating its own little world, temporary little world. Or then you might get distracted and get carried away in your thought, and for 5 or 10 minutes you're thinking about the vacation you're planning the next month, or where you went last week, or an argument you got into with somebody. And so now your mind has created that little world. So our mind is constantly creating little worlds which are focused around whatever is predominantly those aggregates that are predominantly, coming up. And it's largely because people don't have the control over their mind, so they easily get distracted about, and a lot of those things are not really very important that our mind gets carried away with. So so tuning in to the, to see how quickly, and being aware of contact, feeling, perception, and even to know what is happening is part of the training, actually to know. Even the Buddha gave these instructions when he was in so many Dhamma talks about meditation. About, when the material aggregate arises, person knows, this is the material aggregate. When feeling arises, this is feeling. This is perception. This is volition. You can kind of see them just like a domino effect, that fast. And it becomes very interesting, actually. Wow. When you gain some concentration, you start to see how you're actually, seeing this process become very interesting. Becomes very interesting. A lot of people get bored in meditation, or if they don't reach a certain level of concentration, their mind goes asleep, or they get bored, and because they haven't, focused their mind enough to, to tune into what's happening, literally just beneath our nose. And given it does take some time to do that, and that's why in a retreat, like maybe now after the third day, you're starting to, being able to do that a little bit, and it will continue to develop as the days go on too. But anyway, I want to come back now and give some similes of the 5 aggregates. Now the Buddha gave some nice little similes about the 5 aggregates. So the material form. Now, what I've talked about so far, what is this material form? What are you seeing? What are you looking at in terms of the material form? Are you looking at Bhante Rahula? No, that's a perception. What you're seeing is color, shapes, that's all. So that's the material form. And it's called name and form. Then now the mind gives it a name. Feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness now gives it the name of, in this case, Bhante Rahula. Or in that case, the Buddha statue. Or something else. So, but anyway, so material form is like he gave the analogy of a lump of foam floating on a polluted river or lake. Probably got some of that up in Lake Erie, or Sharon, right? The foam on a dirty river. How many have seen that? So when you see that, you might have thought, oh, that's a piece of styrofoam floating over there. Let me go look at it. Maybe I can take that home and use it for something. But then when you get up close to it, and you get a stick to try to fish it out, that foam just kind of scatters and disappears. Scatters, or the wind blows and blows it away. And you say, oh, that wasn't the solid. But you thought it was. Right? I mean, I don't know. So that's the analogy that of the material form is similar to a lump of froth. Because a lump of froth is, let's say, is just made up of cells and molecules. They have a little space between each one, like a snowflake. So everything that you hear, like this, these bodies are just billions of cells, and they all have space in between them. and sounds, smells, everything is just made up of cells, molecules, atoms, and they're surrounded by space. So they're not solid, but they give the illusion of being solid because of just the way the mind has evolved, and because of ignorance and our clinging, and things appear to be solid. So anyway, that's how the Buddha advised us to. He said a clear-sighted person, would get near that and know that that's not solid. But we take things to be real, and then we develop strong attachment to it, and then it causes us to, whatever, rape, pillage, plunder, steal, all kinds of things. So it's a psychology. It's a very deep level of, what the Buddha is talking about these things. It's a super deep level of, mental physics. These physicists these days, physicists and so on, they're interested in the physical universe. In science, they are interested in finding out the beginning and ending of the universe. They're interested in finding, the exact point in time when the Big Bang happened. And they're, sending out missiles to blow up, comets and other things to try to get some minerals to find out what the universe is made up of. So they're interested only in the external world, the beginning and ending of the external, the world, right? Say the world, or the earth. But the Buddha wasn't interested in that. But he was interested in the beginning and ending of suffering, which he called the world. Because the world to the Buddha is the world of seeing, the world of hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. That means this process that the mind is creating the world. Right now, you think you're here. Actually, your mind is creating it. Even right now, your mind is creating it. Even though you think you're looking at solid things, the things may be here, may be solid in one sense, but it's your mind that's actually creating a movie within your mind. And any vision doctor will tell you that that's actually true. So anyway, so the Buddha was also interested in finding the beginning and ending of the world of suffering, but as it occurs in the mind. You want to hear an interesting little story? So there was a deva. How many people have heard of devas? They're like angels or celestial beings. Said that they don't have bodies of light, and they can travel very fast. So one day this deva got up. He said, "I want to find the end of the world." He thought by running, and with one stride, a deva is said to be able to cover 100 miles. So he started walking here and there and started running, tried to find the end of the world. So he went to a couple of holy men in India, ascetics, to ask them, who were supposed to know about all these things. And they stopped them and said, "How do I reach the end of the world?" And they scratched their head and they said, "Go ask the other guy." So then this guy runs over to the other guy and asks him the same question, and he kept getting the same kind of replies. "Go ask the other one, go ask the other one." Finally, the last one he came to, that guy said, "Hey, why don't you go ask Mahabrahma? He's the one who created this world." because Mahabrahma in Hinduism is supposed to be the creator of the world, like God, right? The idea. So why don't you go ask God? He created it. He should be able to tell you how to get to the end of it. Say, oh, that's a great idea. So he, with his power, he runs up to the heaven world. He comes to where Mahabrahma is. He's giving a talk to all of his lesser God disciples, there. He goes up to him and says, Mahabrahma, please, tell me, how do I reach the end of the world? Mahabrahma says, shh, don't talk so loudly. My disciples might hear. I don't know. Go ask the Buddha. So this Rohiti said, what? The Buddha? I just left the Buddha. So he goes back to ask the Buddha. And this is when the Buddha gives one of my favorite suttas. He related to the Buddha what happened. And the Buddha was kind of rolling his eyes, And finally says, my dear Rohitisa, you're not going to find the end of the world by running, by physically running. And that's when he said, the world, the arising of the world, the end of the world, and the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 5 or 6 foot long body with its feelings, perceptions, and consciousness. So, that's what the Buddha was interested in. And he equates the world being diluted by the mental world and also the ego, the sense of the ego, as being the source of our problems, source of suffering, because we are not understanding it. So, so that's the difference between, sort of Western science and the Buddha science. So anyway, coming back to these aggregates, analogies. So, what's the simile for the material aggregate? Foam. Okay. And then feeling feelings are said to be like water bubbles. Now, when you get a pain in your knee, it's painful, right? Because you're relating to it, this pain is in this body, and this is my body, and therefore it's the ego, the sense of self that's struggling to get away from this pain. But anyway, the analogy for the feelings as being like water bubbles. You see a water bubble coming up from the bottom of a river. And if you're looking, let's say, in an aquarium, and you have a fish aquarium or something, and you see these bubbles coming up from the bottom, and they look like a bubble. You think, well, that's a bubble. When you get to the top, they burst. Where's that bubble? Gone. So the same way, these feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neutral feelings, they don't really have any more reality than a water bubble. Meaning that they arise due to causes, but these reactions are just created in our mind. The idea of painful or pleasant. But we cling to them because we don't understand them. The same way as I didn't understand my reaction to avocados. I was taking them to be real. Causing me a lot of suffering. Until I could change my attitude toward them. Anyway, so the feelings are like the water bubbles. And the perception, what do you think perception, the analogy for perception is? Well, it's a It's a mirage. You know what a mirage is? You're out in the desert and you're thirsty, and then you think that there's some water out on the road, and you keep walking toward it, but you never get there. So perceptions are like a mirage. They appear, but they're not real. These perceptions of like, you're hearing and a sound, and some people are talking, and this perception. It's your mind that's creating it. You're not seeing anybody. There's a sound floating through the empty space, the space of awareness. Yet the mind grabs the sound and creates some scenario out of it, and now you're getting invested in it. And these people are not even in your life. They're like, you're by yourself, maybe. You're meditating and you're embroiled in all kind of mental turmoil. I mean, how many people that's happened to you at some point? And where is it? It's nothing. You spend minutes and minutes, hours, caught up in just mind, and it's just an empty mirage. No substance to it. It's just created within the mind. Wow. So, anyway, that's the analogy of the perception. And then the volition, which is the habits. The easiest way to define the sankharas is, I like to say that it's the habit reactions. Or the physical reactions and our mental reactions to things that we're experiencing. He says they're similar to a banana tree trunk. How many people know what a banana tree is made up of? Or let's say an onion might be a more common example. So an onion, you keep on peeling away the layers of onion, and inside there's actually no core, right? The same way with a banana tree. Keep on peeling away all those things, and inside is just a hollow air. So all of our habits, if we keep peeling back what caused these, you see that ultimately there's no core to them. It's just habits. So that's the way the Buddha wanted us to analyze these aggregates. And actually you can do that in meditation. You can spend a whole hour in meditation just, remembering and then thinking about it. And, when it happens, contemplate it. It becomes very fascinating, actually. And you can get really, really concentrated in it. You can even attain the first jhana doing that. Anyway, so the last one, the consciousness. Consciousness. What's the analogy for consciousness? Especially the ego consciousness. A magician's trick. Like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. We pull an ego, a me, out of nothing. Because down in the deepest layer of awareness, there is no ego. It's just a little bubble that's been created. It's a sankhara that's been created with that example of the baby. And perpetuated through ignorance, and we keep on reinforcing the idea of these things being real, and that's why they keep appearing to be it, and they fool us. And then we get trapped by it, and we don't know how to get free from it. That's the whole point. But unless in the meditation, unless you actually pay attention to it, and that's your purpose, is to want to free the mind, liberate the mind from all of its, phobias and obsessions and wrong views and bad habits and delusions, and this is the way it has to be done. I mean, to go to the very source where they're created, and then making the necessary changes to transform the mind. Anyway, so the consciousness is like the magician's trick. So does anybody have any questions about that? It's still fresh in your mind, yes? Okay.
I don't understand why consciousness is at the end. Because contact, feeling, perception, but consciousness is just a cognition, right? Perception forms an object out of cognition and feeling. So could you explain why consciousness comes to us?
This idea that coming last, I mean, it's just when we use language and we have to explain things, it's easier for the mind to understand things in kind of a chronological order. But all those aggregates, because it's happening so fast, they're basically, for all intents and purposes, they're simultaneous. Just like if somebody sees a grain of sand, he'll think that that's just a grain of sand. He doesn't know there's thousands of molecules and atoms and electrons in that one grain of sand because he doesn't have the means to see it. So anyway, consciousness is one of the most difficult one of those aggregates to sort of understand and detach from. But consciousness is basically just the light. Now we turn all these lights off. You're not gonna, if it was nighttime, let's say, with a moonless night, and it's dark in a room, you don't see anything, right? But if you turn the light switch on, then there's light. Now the light didn't bring the things into the room, the things were already in the room. But you didn't see them. So the same way, when you go to sleep at night, because of the brain chemistry and things like that, your senses get shut down, so the contact is not reaching the brain. Even though there's things going on in your room, if you're sleeping, you might not hear, the clock ticking or, somebody talking in the next room or various things. Because the sleep mechanism disconnects the consciousness from the senses. So, we could be dead for all you know for many hours during the night, right? You wake up and all of a sudden then it's working again. So the same way with in the room, we turn the light on and we're seeing things. So the consciousness is, as long as we're awake, when you wake up in the morning, it's like the consciousness is simply the light that allows you to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and feel things. And even recognize thoughts going through your mind. Now, when you dream at night, you're not really conscious of the dream, but it appears, it's going on in your head, and somehow it's kind of a mystery, but anyway, it's, going on in your head, but you're not really awake to it, and you might be able to remember a bit of it when you first get up, but because you weren't conscious, you usually don't remember the dreams very well. Although you can train yourself to do that, but normally not. So consciousness basically is the light that allows us to, but somehow because of ignorance, this little sense of I thinks it owns the light. I am the owner of this light, the ego. I am the hearer, see, taster, smeller, toucher. I am the one deciding this or that. But it's basically just an illusion, like this pulling a rabbit out of the hat, And that's one of the deepest mysteries of the mind, and things that even our neurologists and all these brain scientists, even they don't know. Although they're trying to, little by little, trying to understand it. But the Buddha understood these things perfectly because he had developed his powers of concentration and to the ultimate degree of an electron microscope. that was able to smash the atom and see the emptiness of the mind. So anyway, I think that may be enough for this talk, and there's more to be said about it, especially consciousness. So if you want to say sadhu, you can. But, okay, so I explain these things like that because this is the focus of mindfulness meditation on its intended or deeper level. And if you don't have some clear idea, like a scientist normally when he goes to investigate, let's say, an experiment, right? So he's going to examine something under a microscope, but he has some idea what he's looking for. If he wants to find a cancer or a certain disease, he has to kind of, target that. I mean, is it? So the same way that the Buddha's target was finding the source of suffering, the ultimate cause of suffering. And that's why he targeted what he was looking at in his meditation, he targeted it to observing, the mental process, to see how it was put together and how it ticks, how the ego was created, and how that gets all bound up in the inner and outer tangle, and then creating the karma that then comes back to us as suffering. All that he could see through developing those powers of his mind. And so that's why it's good to have an understanding of these things, because otherwise the mind gets so easily distracted. If you don't have a specific thing, you keep your mind on the object, like the breathing or the body, you give it 1 second of idle and the mind is out, escapes. I mean, how many have noticed that in their meditation, how easy it is the mind just vanish from where it was. You're sitting and breathing and all of a sudden you're caught up in some mental fantasy or the past or the future. It's because we didn't have enough focus to keep the mind pinned to that, like the moment-to-moment things that are going through the body. Maybe the breathing is not just, in, out, might be boring, not enough, But when you're alert and you're feeling, sensation here and there, itches, and there's a lot going on. It brightens the mind, keeps the mind right there. The breathing. That's how you have to, to overcome the hindrances. And it takes a lot of effort to do that. And time, of course. But little by little, you'll see that every day it's going to get better in the meditation in terms of those hindrances weaken. And the key is maintaining the awareness outside of sitting. See, this modern day thing, I meditate for 10 minutes, or meditate for 30 minutes a day, then the rest of the day they're unmindful. No, it's not going to get it. So you have to, when you come out of meditation, that's why it's important not to break it by moving slowly. People hear the bell and they just want to stand up, bolt up, and, go somewhere. No, they lose everything. That's why you have to maintain that continuity of the practice. That's why I want to ring the bell. It says, don't just immediately move, First, mindfully put the hands, take a deep breath, get the energy moving, and slowly stretch out the legs. And so you're not breaking the concentration. You're just flowing, with the present moment movements, of the body. That's how, that is the way that you build up the momentum. Because then when you go back to sit the next time, you're already there. Or you haven't, you only have to spend a few minutes getting back into the groove. So anyway, this is why I just want to, repeat this again to, encourage you to, make the best of your, you've come here for a whole week out of your life, you've come here. Right? And to practice. So we try to, create the good conditions to make the most of that time. Because even a week is very, very short in terms of, meditation, developing the concentration and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and mindfully stand up and then do a short